Well, hello friends, this here's March 2nd, 2016. It's good to see everybody today. Well, today I want to start back into this in-depth study of history from the beginning of the world. We've covered quite a bit of stuff in the last 3 or 4 videos. So I'm going to get back into that today because yesterday we were just kind of discussing a few things auxiliary to that subject. And how hard it is for people to believe and to understand because there's so much confusion in the world. Well, no less confusion here. In fact, far more confusion than you could even imagine. Because as far as I know, nowhere in the world can you go and get this information that I'm about to give you. You can't go into a history book. You can get the information that I'm going to tell you in a history book, but it's hard to understand it because they'll tell you about some king, they won't tell you he was Jewish. They'll tell you about some group, but they don't know what was really going on there, so they're just telling you their side or their version of it, and they leave out a lot of the basic knowledge of really what's going on. You might find another book somewhere over here that tells you, oh, but guess what? Something about this group that you didn't know, and the date was wrong, and things. So in order to get this and put it all together, it's quite a task. And there's no way I could have gotten any of this information on my own because I've never been to school and I don't go reading all these books and I don't have time. I make a video every day and I don't have time to read books or do any research. I basically spend my time in nature, sucking up the sun and just quiet concentration and peaceful thoughts. And I always find that whatever it is important, whatever I need to know, my Father in heaven always gives that information to me. And I find that right now, as we're trying to understand all this history, the reason for this is because we've been given a lot of lies and deception, and there's a lot of interference in our government and our world. There's some things that's happened in our world, such as the coming of the United States and the Constitution. And we as people, and as Christians, and whatever faith you may be, agnostic or atheist or whoever and whatever you may be, we're having to deal with what are we going to do? Who are we going to vote in as president? Are we going to vote at all? Do we believe in the government? Do we even trust in freedom anymore? Do we even have any freedom? Should we go off in the woods and die, or should we? What do we do? See, we've got to have some knowledge. We've got to figure out what's going on. And we need faith. The Bible says we need faith, but the only way we can have faith is not blind faith. Let me close these windows a little bit because we're getting a lot of noise. I don't know how much. We don't want blind faith, but we want faith that's based on evidence, as it says in the book of Hebrews. It says faith is evidence of things not seen. So we have to have evidence in order to build our faith. And the Bible also says this means everlasting life. They're taking in knowledge of you, the only true and living God. Not the God of your choice, but the true and the living God, which doesn't mean, oh, I worship fire and you worship air and, rock, scissors, fire, I went. It's not like that. The true and living God is the God who is king and omniscient and powerful and created all. So it's the source of all. So we have mind and compassion and love, and we can receive His Spirit, and we can act independently, and we can be rulers of our own domain. And we don't need to be under law because we're the heirs of the world and of the kingdom. And as you all know, He's created this world, the whole universe. We've talked about how this has occurred. We've talked about the ancient wisdom and how they talk about the evolution of man, how the Nibirians evolved for millions of years, and how there were fights and wars and battles, and how it got to the earth, and they set up a ruling dynasty on the earth. We talked about how they set that dynasty up in Egypt, in the city of On. In the Bible it's called the city of On, but in Sumerian it is An. And this went on down On earth, it started with Enoch. Enoch was a product of the seed of An and a human. And that was Enoch. Enoch was the one who actually built the pyramids and put all that wisdom and knowledge in those pyramids in Egypt. Because it says, well, Enoch, in ancient times, the pyramid was called the Pillar of Enoch. And the word Enoch has come down to us that way in English, but that's also another word for phoenix. So the phoenix bird with the outstretched wings is the wisdom of Enoch. And it is the kingdom of Enoch, which is the kingdom of God, or of Anu. And this ancient kingdom was Atlantis. The Bible says in Isaiah chapter 18 verse 1 that the ancient kingdom of Atlantis was in America, on the other side of the earth, the land of outstretched wings of the phoenix bird, basically. That you've ever seen that phoenix symbol. And the symbolism that goes with that bird, well, even today we've got the eagle, but originally on the dollar bill, when they put that eagle, it was originally a phoenix bird. And it's got the eye of Osiris there. And this is all going back to the ancient mysteries, the stuff that the Masons put the Constitution here, and they're basically bringing back the kingdom of Atlantis, the kingdom of Enoch. So a lot of this stuff is getting mixed up today. Most people think all this is the occult symbols and it's all evil and it's a plot to take over the world. And it's not true. It's a plot to enlighten mankind. It's in the Bible, but there's another plot being carried out right alongside of it. And this is the rebellion of Marduk. And I'm going to tell you about that rebellion and what's really going on. He got heavy into the Jesuits and the Illuminati, which is going on today, and it's being, headed up by Marduk. But we got to go back now and understand where all of this comes from. Revelation is very symbolic, and we've got all these things, and it's all swimming in our head, and we don't understand it. So, time went on, and Christ came to the earth. It says that Jesus had 12 disciples. This means that they chose one of the representative of each of the 12 tribes. They had a representative of each of the tribes that they would take and send into the world where those tribes were. Because Jesus says, go only unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And of course, Paul was sent to the Gentiles, which the Gentiles at that time was Japheth. Of course, Japheth would later become the house in which many of the royal seed of Israel would live. Because the prophecy originally was that Shem shall live in Japheth's house, or his tent. But for now, Paul was sort of an interim prophet or apostle sent to people who thought they were Gentiles because their descendancy originally went back to Japheth, but who in time would also wake up and find out that they had been seeded with the children of Israel. And we're going to talk about how that seeding was done. But first we want to talk about the dragon, the beast, and because a lot of people are saying, well, you were saying, Dave, that Mary Magdalene went into Europe, brought with her the child of Jesus, and so you're saying the purpose for that was to seed Europe with the holy seed, the transubstantiation, and the Holy Grail is Mary Magdalene that held the sacred blood. And the Templars were there to protect that holy blood. And you're saying, okay, I kind of understand that. Makes a little sense. I'm going to reserve judgment. And then wait a minute. What about Prince Charles? And Prince William and Harry and Philip and Diana and stuff? Are you saying that these the good guys? That's what we want to get into today, because I've had some questions about this recently, and so I want to do a video on this because this is part of our history. We've got to carry this history from the beginning all the way to the end. We've got to understand why it was done, who are the players, and why are they doing it. And so, therefore, what's going on today? Why is this going on today? Who are the good guys? What are they trying to do? Where are they deceiving us? Where are we wrong? Where, if they're trying to deceive us, they're pretty good at it. Got a lot of questions. Why are they being allowed to deceive us? And what is the deception, and what are we going to do about it? Well, You see, if you go back to the Dark Ages, you're going to look at a place that was very dark. There was no knowledge, they had no schools, and they were being taught fairy tales. And this was done purposely. They didn't want them to know. Who were they? Well, you've got the Anunnaki who go to Nibiru and come back on their ships, and they're up there watching, and they're saying, well, the good guys, why don't they just tell Marduk to go take a hike, Well, here's the problem. They have a prime directive, and that is our freedom. You and I have the freedom to do what we want. Somebody comes up and offers you a pile of crap and says, here, eat this. Our Father can only do one thing. He can say, you know what, that's probably not good for you. But he can't stop you from eating it. Everyone has free will. And there's a purpose to that. But I'm not going to get into that. Psychological reasons and all the spiritual reasons why we have to be pure. Our will has to be, you cannot compromise that free will. That can never be compromised. All of us have to make our own decisions and judgments because we're growing. We're heirs. We're children of the living God, and we have to be able to make our own decisions. There was a time when we were controlled in a much greater way, under laws and guilt and wickedness. Now we're free to a large extent, and it's because of our Lord Jesus Christ. Because he died for us, because he gave us love, because he taught us, and he gave us the Holy Spirit. He showed us the way, he showed us the path. But you notice when he was on the earth, he didn't say, you know what, you guys, I'm getting sick and tired of you Jews deceiving people and putting laws on them and making them feel guilty. Come on, angels, come on down here, let's just mop up the earth with these guys. He didn't do that. So he's not going to do it now either. See, Jesus had a chance. He said, what are you talking about? He said, if I wanted to, I could bring several legions of angels down here and wipe you off the face of the earth. But he says, my kingdom's no part of this world. And so I'm leaving, and I'm going to try and explain this to everyone else, that what's important is spiritual things, not this flesh. You've got to learn to overcome this flesh. So when somebody's threatening you with physical pain or they're going to take away something you like, or they're going to offer you something you do like, just if you'll give them your allegiance or whatever, he can't stop that, because actually he wants you to be tested this way. He wants you to have the opportunity to make a decision. Well, I'm going to do the right thing. See? The devil offered me the kingdom, but I'm going to do the right thing. Jesus had to have the same thing happen to him. Remember, Satan took him out into a lonely place and said, I offer you all the kingdoms of the world. Well, how can Satan offer Jesus everything when Jesus owns everything already? Same thing with you and I. How in the world are we being deceived when we are the children of the living God and we own everything already? Well, the problem is that spiritually we have great power. But in the flesh, the ego rules. And the ego is saying, I'll give you mansions and power, and this is lust. And lust only gets you a little bit for a little while, but ultimately it puts you in bondage. It's just a deception. So we're being ruled over by our own ego. The devil is just a deceiver. It's darkness. It's just a lie. But we've got to overcome this lie. Just the same way that Jesus did. Jesus said, it says in Hebrews that he learned by the things in which he suffered. And so this is why we suffer from him. So this is why we're here. And this is why when Jesus left the earth, he didn't go, you're all saved now. What he did was he said, now look, now watch careful. They're trying to kill me. And watch this. See, they hit me over here. Now you hit me on this side. It doesn't matter. They want to kill me? Let's go. I want you to learn that it doesn't matter. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You've got to have integrity, love, and loyalty. And in the end, that's going to give us joy and eternal salvation. The spiritual man inside of us has got to be reborn because it's asleep right now. So anyway, how does this all apply? What's going on? See, Marduk's up there just, ruling the world. How? Why? Because we're letting him. See, it says in the Bible, it says they love the darkness. It says that they refuse to receive the truth that they might be saved. The love of the truth that they might be saved. But he allows this great delusion to go unto them, because they refuse to receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. So friends, all we got to do individually, we don't have to wait for the rest of the world to receive the truth. We can do it individually right now. I guarantee, my Lord Jesus told me, and I believe it, and I don't know about you, that he said if I tell that mountain to be uprooted and planted in the sea, it will obey me. I have that authority. He said, you will do greater works than I. And I believe it. This is what faith is. We've got to overcome this flesh and have no fear, little flock, for our Father has given us the kingdom. So what's going on? We got this dragon. We got a woman. You see, the dragon chases the woman into the wilderness. And there she is fed away from the face of the serpent for a times, and a half a time. The times, and a half a time, see, that's 3.5 times, and that's half of 7. Remember we said 7, it represents the whole length of time. Half a time is the part of the time that we exist in the universe where we're carnal and physical. It's just a representation of all the period of time in which we are on this earth struggling and suffering. And during this time when we're on the earth struggling, we're being chased by this dragon. So, in the end, you see this woman, she's now clothed with the sun, grace, love, truth, and the moon is beneath her feet, the reflectory light. The law is not the light. It's just a veil. It's just a reflection of the light. And the moon, which represents the lesser light, or the lesser truth, which is just carnal commandments, and is not the truth of our Lord Jesus Christ, is now beneath the woman's feet. She's conquered the law. She's in the age of grace and truth. And on her head is a crown of 12 stars. You see, she has conquered, and she receives her crown. She conquered the 12 forces and vibrations of the zodiac. She's gone through each door, into the temple, and now she's overcome, and she'll go out no more. Who is the woman? The woman is Mary Magdalene. The woman is Tiatifi from Egypt, the princess. The woman is Eleanor from the king of the Franks. The woman is Mary Magdalene, the wife of our Lord Jesus Christ. And their son brought that holy seed, the seed of the woman, into Europe. Now, remember, originally, the children of Israel lived in Palestine, and Babylon came and took them. And it says Babylon took the holy seed. Jeremiah talks about this, and also in Ezekiel, and also in Daniel. And each one of these books gives us a little picture, a piece of the picture. But they took the holy seed, Jeconiah, Zedekiah, Jehoiachin. And they were the royal bloodline of the kings. It says they put them in a dungeon, and they stuck them in there for a while. And then it says they brought them out and restored them to their thrones. And the people were in the diaspora, and they let their kings, their holy lineal descendants from the line of Judah, rule over them. And then after a while, the children of Israel started migrating. And this was the diaspora, because it didn't take many years, and one king came, another king went, and they situated it so that another king would come along, and he would say, all right, you guys can go now. We're not holding you here any longer. And so they started taking off, and they went up through the Caucasus Mountains. Well, they took with them their royal seed, and they started a royal house. And so there was several different royal houses all throughout the world. The seed went into all the world. There was a group that stayed in Babylon. That's where Peter went. There was a group that went up to France. There's a group that went up to Ireland. And they went all over the world. This is why Jesus had 12 disciples, and he sent them all over the world. It represents the fact that our Father in heaven sent one of the tribes to different places. And if you look in the Genesis chapter 49, it tells you a sort of symbolic picture of where they would eventually go. It says that Dan would be a serpent by the way and bite the horse's feet along the trail. And it gives these little pictures of these tribes and what they would do. It says that Joseph would be a branch that would go over the wall, and we'd be planted by a well, and we'd be fruitful. The wall is the barrier of Europe. He went over the ocean, and he went to America. And it says it becomes a multitude. So Joseph inherits the seed, or the blessing, or the birthright. And it says he's a mixed multitude. So mankind went forward mixed with the seed of the gods. They planted the line of the kings in Egypt in the city of An. And at the time of Christ, the Essenes were of that royal line back to Egypt. So we talked about how Charlemagne was a descendant of David. He appointed all the barons and the vassals and the counts and so forth. And what were they doing there? They were... Remember, in that part of Europe, there was just total darkness. They didn't have schools or roads or anything at that time. They didn't have knowledge. And this was the whole point. Marduk didn't want people to be educated and learn and to grow and to overcome this physical world. He wanted to keep us down so that he could use us and to manipulate us and to get power and authority and grow. So he was abusing us. So how was Jesus, he looks down on the earth, how is Jesus going to help us? Well, one way he could have done it was get an army together and start killing all the people that tried to keep us blind and enslaved. Just kill them all. But you know that's not the way Jesus works. So instead, here's what he did. He put all these people in charge to seed Europe with a higher DNA, with a DNA from the gods, to improve our DNA. And at the same time, remember that in order to grow spiritually, you've got to learn. So he started building schools and education and government and better ways of government. When they finally went up into England and built London, put libraries in and made the Magna Carta, the jury of your peers, started, arranging a new sort of government whereby the people could take authority over their own lives and start learning and have enlightenment, Marduk looked down and said, "Oh my goodness, if I don't stop this enlightenment, these people are going to learn who I am. They're going to find out what's going on, that they're being enslaved, and I'm not going to be able to entice them with beer and wine and cigarettes anymore, because they're going to learn how to take mastery over the world. They're going to be educated. They're going to learn things that's going to give them faith, and they're going to grow." So, what could Marduk do to defend the darkness against the light? He just raised up armies to go down there and destroy their libraries. So Jesus' answer was a library, and Marduk's answer was a match. Burn it down. Bring in armies and torture them and kill them. See, if you torture them, maybe they won't ever do it again. But there were some brave men who said, you can torture me all you want, but I'm going to teach the people. I'm going to do like Jesus, and I'm going to teach the truth. I'm going to teach my disciples. In the end, I may die on a cross, but I will not bow. I'm going to have integrity. This is what growth is, integrity. And so he taught us, through all of this persecution and stuff, integrity. And we taught ourselves. We learned and we grew. This is how it works. But the ego kept bringing us back. Nah, you can't do that. You're going to hell. You're guilty. I hate you. You're bad. You're wrong. I'm right. I'm going to judge you. You're going to hell. This stuff kept going back and forth. So Marduk's way was wars and Catholic Church and bishops and priests doing bad things in the basement, keeping us all deceived, keeping us down under control. And Jesus' way was to build schools and better ways of government and democracy. Until this war got so bad, they finally had to go to America. See, Jesus had this land, the ancient Atlantis, prophesied in the Bible, to come back in the latter days, and there would never be a king rule upon this land. There never has been a king. Because you see, in this country, it's democracy. Well, that democracy's, our Constitution's hanging by a thread right now, friends. And now it's time for another martyr, another person who's willing to stand up and say no. Otherwise, we're going to lose the Constitution. We're going to lose our freedom, friends. Enough of you has got to wake up real soon and stand up and say no. And I have faith in the people. I have faith in all the children of the living God. We're going to stand up. We're not going to let him take our... I know the destiny of man, and I know what it's written on those stones of destiny. And that is our eternal freedom and happiness and love. And we're going to do it. We're going to make it. We're going to overcome the beast by the word of our witnessing. I guarantee it's going to happen. And no matter war and threats and violence and hate and confusion and evil is going to stop us. So the dragon represents the kings of the world, the carnal order, the beast, the government of the earth. There's 7 heads and 10 horns. And the beast that was, is not, and yet is also of the 7. So each of the 7 has 10 horns, and that makes 70 kings, which is all the kings of all the world. And each one has its own period of time to rule, and it goes down through Egypt and Babylon and Media, Persia and Greece and Rome and all the kings of the world, and then down to the day where England ruled, and a representative of everybody, and all of those 70 kings have all had their chance to rule. Starts off there in Babylon, and they're called czars. You see, Nebuchadnezzar, Belteshazzar. This was where the czars came from, and these were the kings that go back to the Igi. In the Sumerian tablets, it calls them the Igi. There were 200 angels who fell. And you see, it wasn't so bad that they had relations with the daughters of men. The problem was that they wanted to enslave us. That was their great sin. A lot of people think that the most important thing, the worst thing that they did was they had relations with the daughters of men. Well, you know, Jesus was also born of a virgin, a son of the gods. And so was Enoch, and so was Noah. So that part wasn't the worst part. That was actually something that our Father in heaven actually did to seed mankind. But the Igi, they had another purpose in mind. They didn't want to improve mankind. They wanted to enslave us. They wanted to develop seed that they could use as slaves. And they created a law that says, now you got to do what we say. You're all liars and you're all sinners and you're going to go to hell if we don't, get what we want, and you got to obey us and give us sacrifices, and you're our slaves. And they invented the caste system, and if you weren't up to par or didn't have the holy blood of the gods, if you weren't related to one of them, then you had to be a lower slave. And this was their system. We had to be, freed from this system that Marduk and his Igi brought to the world. So what Jesus did was to try and enlighten us. So the kings of Babylon go back to Nimrod. And the story of Nimrod is very interesting. You can read about it in the book of Jasher. See, Adam and Eve, when they sinned in the garden against Jehovah, Jehovah gave them these animal skins to wear. This represents the kingdoms of the physical world. The bloodthirsty beast. He covered them with the coat of a beast. And he put them under his law. And this is what atonement is. Atonement means to cover. And so he covered them with the hide, and the blood atoned them, and they ate the meat. And this was that new system or government. This is why when Cain and Abel came up there, and Abel brought sacrifice of an animal, Jehovah liked that. But the vegetables he didn't like. He didn't like Cain. He demanded blood, and without the shedding of blood there would be no forgiveness. He was a very terrible tyrant, and he cursed mankind. And so this went on down until after the flood. Then the firstborn of Noah was Ham, and then the firstborn of Ham was Cush, and the firstborn of Cush was Nimrod, and his sister Sheba. So Nimrod got the coat because he was going to rule the physical part. He represented that son like Cain or or Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob. He represented that part. Like Esau was the hairy one. He was the one that seemed to be a hunter, just like Nimrod. He was the one that started offering up sacrifices and killing animals, and he was going to rule the world. He was a ruthless warrior, a Gibborim. And he got this coat that Adam had. This was a coat, a royal coat that was handed down from Adam to all his children, Seth, and all the way down. And finally it was given to Noah, and it was acquired by Nimrod. Well, that led to a problem. You had the flesh, you had the spirit, and it had to be welded together. You needed unity between the flesh and the spirit. You needed a wedding. So this is why Solomon married the Queen of Sheba from the royal house of the High Queen of the house of Ham. This is why in Babylon the czars go all the way back to Nimrod. And they were the beast, or they were the ones that would rule the physical world for a time, until the one who has the legal right, which is the Spirit, the Christ, the Joseph. So the czars of Babylon, the Nebuchadnezzars, the Belteshazzars, they went down into Russia as czars and CEASARS in Rome, and CHARLEMAGNE in Germany. And they ruled the world through this line of kings. So the woman's seed came into Europe. Now when she got there, there were the CEASARS. And the CEASARS ruled. Well, they were Rome. And Rome fell in about 400 and something. And they fell to the Visigoths. Well, the Visigoths was a group of... There were the tribes, the Germanic tribes. And these Germanic tribes were the Vandals, the Herlus, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, which West Goths and the East Goths, but that's what that means. They're the Lombards. Now, these were the children of Japheth. It says this in the book of in the book of Jasher. So we know that the Germanic tribes are children of Japheth. And now you've got CEASARS that are from the throne of Babylon, because when the kingdom of Babylon started to fade away, they brought their holy priesthood from Nimrod up to Pergamus. And from Pergamus, they transferred their royal priesthood to Rome with the CEASARS. So the CEASARS was the ruling power from Babylon, from Nimrod. The tribes of the German tribes, the Vandals and the Visigoths and the Lombards and so forth, those were Japheth, and they were migrated there centuries before, originally back in the days before, in the days of Abraham. So what was happening was, as Babylon was through the czars, were trying to take over Europe. They got all the way up into Russia with the czars, and up into Germany with the Khazars, and those were basically this line of kings from Babylon. Well, at the same time, you've got the female line from Egypt, Teotifi, Eleanor, and Mary Magdalene, coming in to infuse this holy blood from the chalice, or the holy bloodline, all the way back to King An in Egypt. And this was that holy virgin that would bring forth the seed. Well, the seed is brought forth from the woman. It would be a holy virgin birth. There wouldn't be any father. It would just be this miraculous holy birth. And it represented the fact that there in Europe, you've got all this darkness going on. And miraculously, here comes this woman, Mary Magdalene, and she brings with her the holy seed. It's a miracle. And that holy seed didn't just come with the bloodline of Christ, but it came with the teachings of Christ. The Essenes came in, and they brought with them the holy teachings of Christ. The Nazarenes, the Essenes, and the Essenes came in, and they taught education and knowledge and science. And they wanted to educate people and enlighten people, and to gather the tribes of Israel and seed them into all the earth, so that the world could come out a great multitude which no man could number. So what you've got now is the battleground of the kingdom of Japheth. And basically this is just a type for the battleground for the whole world, because this was going all over the world, but primarily there in Europe, where all civilization was sort of coming up to a climax, to a head. And this battle was being carried out by the czars and the holy bloodline of Christ, and they were battling it out. It comes down to Rome and the Catholic Church against the mystery schools and those who wanted to enlighten the world. Now see, the Catholic bishops and popes, they just wanted to rule over everyone, to have all these ceremonies and rituals and keep people in the darkness. Now, just bring your sacrifice and come and do a little this and that, and then, you're saved. Keep them in ignorance. Don't let them know what's going on, and just build big temples which dazzle the mind and take the money from the people, like a tax, and keep the people down like peasants. But the Cathars, they were learning great wisdom. They were learning about love and education and science and building libraries. So remember, all while this is all being orchestrated by heavenly forces. People on the earth weren't doing this on their own. They didn't know what was going on. This was all being directed by destiny and the gods. So remember, when the gods first came here, they came in their ships and they built the area down around the Tigris and the Euphrates River. This was the Garden of Eden, or to this day it's called the Gulf of Aden. Well, remember, the gods at that time were from Nibiru, and that planet was a lot cooler. And this is why it says in Genesis that gods always walked about at the cool of the day, because they couldn't take the heat down there. So what happened was they tried to move the kingdom further north up into Europe, and they started moving their base of operations along the Rhine and the Rhone River, which goes all the way from Belgium all the way down, sort of the line between France and Germany, all the way down through Lyons and down to Montpellier. This was called the Valley of the Gods. And so this is how we say it in English, valley. But in ancient Latin, it's called valle. In French, it's Valdo. And in German, it became known as Vox. Well, if you've ever read the story of King Arthur, he has this prince that comes along who ends up marrying the princess and saving the kingdom and killing the dragon. Well, whoever's the holder of the sword, which is the truth, right, ends up getting the princess. And this prince's name was Perceval. Perceval means the Prince Val, which in English is the Prince of the Valley, or the High Kings of the Valley. As I said, in French, the name valley is Valdo. They became known as the Waldensians because, you see, the Catholic Church did not want this enlightenment. They did not want the kings of the gods in the world. So they started wiping them out. Now, there was two inquisitions. The one inquisition was to kill out the Sephardic Jews who were true Jews in Spain. Those were the ones that came up. They were Essenes. They were teaching great knowledge and truth to the world. They had universities and schools. They were educating everyone. People were getting along. They made a pact. The Jewish Sephardic Jews there, or the children of Israel, was representative of all the tribes of Israel there. They made a pact with the Moors, the black Moors, and they had peace. So they had to get rid of these Sephardic Israelites that were down there in Spain. But there was another group of people that bothered them very much, and this was these descendants of the gods that were along the Rhone and the Rhine rivers. This is the story of King Arthur and the Prince Perceval, the Prince of the Valley. This Rhine and Rhone rivers that goes down through Belgium, down through Lyons, all the way down and around to Montpellier. This was called Valos, Valley, or Valdo. And the great kings had great wealth because they were kings. Well, when the Catholic Church came in to try and destroy them, they started killing all the line of the kings that go back to the royal blood. It was a great massacre. Well, in order to stop this, because you see, Christ in heaven was the one watching and knew what was going on, and he wasn't willing to fight back. The people there were Cathars. The Waldensians, or the people of the valley, were, they had been serving the Lord Jesus Christ and through the mysteries, and they knew about love and truth, and they wouldn't pick up arms and have war and so forth. And their king and the kings there also would not fight. So what they did was they took all of their wealth and they put it into the hands of the people. And the people became known as the Waldensians, or the people of Waldo, or the people of the valley. And all the royal wealth of the kings was just given to the common people in order to keep it out of the hands of the Catholic Church. This really pissed off the Catholic Church, and this is why we had the First Inquisition, to wipe out the Waldensians. Sometimes they were called Albigensians because they held up in the mountains of the Alps. But they were a lot of these people. I mean, there were literally millions of them that refused to become Catholics and loved the great kings and the mysteries and the truths that they had known, and refused to become Catholics. In fact, even to the point where they were martyred, hundreds and thousands of them martyred for Jesus Christ. And today we have very little knowledge about what happened. We just know that there was an Inquisition and they killed all the Waldensians. We don't even know who the Waldensians are, but they were people of Waldo, or people of the Valley of the Kings. Now, the Waldensians finally were pretty much wiped out. All the line of the kings all the lines of the kings that came through there and went back to An, the high king in Egypt, were pretty much all wiped out. But some of them were preserved, and they went to Germany. And when they got to Germany, they called themselves Vox, because it's a different language, so they spelled it differently. And in Germany, they were called Vox. In fact, there's another story about these romance stories of King Arthur, and it actually, instead of saying Percival, it called it Percivox. Well, then these kings, these royal bloodline of Vox, ended up going up into England, and they became Vas, which was V-A-U-S-E. And in time, in around 17-something, they came to Boston, and they changed their name to Vos. And so, this was a remnant. These people that were called Vos were a remnant of the ancient bloodline of the kings. But they gave up their kingship, and they gave up their wealth, and they put it all into the hands of the people, which is actually very symbolic. What they actually did was give them the truth and love and integrity to survive. No matter whatever happened, it didn't matter if you died. It only matters that you have integrity. And so you see, the Catholic Church went in, being steamrolled by Marduk in the heavens, to wipe out in wars and inquisitions and bloody murder, to kill off the seed. And they only succeeded in wars and bloody murders and darkness, and that's all they succeeded in doing, but they didn't succeed in stamping out the truth, which came down to us through the Cathars and the Waldensians, and this ancient knowledge of the Zohar and the Kabbalah and the ancient wisdom that we still hold to this day. You see, it doesn't matter now. The bloodline of Christ is to be shared with all. It is a holy transubstantiation of the bloodline of Christ into all the people. And anybody who can trace their line back to Christ, it means nothing. Because the important thing is that, and today every one of us can trace our line somewhere back. Because that seed has been mixed into all the earth. But what's important is that we're growing in knowledge and in truth and in integrity. And we've got a kingdom where they come over here and they made a constitution, and there will be no more kings on this land. This is the ancient land where Atlantis was, where Enoch was, and he built that original city of Atlantis that perished in the flood. That Plato says is beyond the Straits of Gibraltar, which is there over by Morocco. If you take a straight line from Palestine across the rivers of Goshen, or the rivers of Ethiopia, and you go through the Straits of Gibraltar, you come to America, and this is the ancient place of the outstretched wings of the phoenix bird, or the place of Enoch, or the Phenok. which is where the ancient wisdom was originally disseminated upon the earth through the teachings of Enoch, carried down through Joseph in Egypt, and down through the Essenes, and then spread throughout Europe and all the world. And even though they wiped them out, all the ancient gods that lived along the Rhone and Rhine rivers, and stamped out a lot of their blood, all they ended up doing was scattering their seed into all the earth, so it was mixed into all the world. And that's what happened to the holy blood. So then who are the kings that sit on the throne in Europe today? Well, some of them still have some of the blood from Christ. But a very strange thing happened. Before Charlemagne, there was only about 2% of the world's population that could actually consider Jewish. Well, after that, until about the year 1500, it started growing and growing and growing, and now about 97%, or some say 97, over 90% of all the Jews in the world aren't even of the Sephardic Jews or the real Jewish bloodline, but are from the Ashkenazi Jews. Because see, what happened was they saw, Marduk looked down and saw what they were doing and mixing the seed and enlightening people, and so he had wars to try and destroy this, and he kept destroying all the true Jews. That's what the Second Inquisition is about, to kill the Sephardic Jews. That's what that was about there, in Germany. They were trying to kill all the true Jewish people so they could stamp out this enlightenment, because they're the ones that are doing all this enlightenment. Problem is now they've stamped them out. It doesn't work anymore because the truth is in the world. The Constitution is here. Our freedom is here. We have schools and learning and universities. Enlightenment is here. They can't do nothing about it unless we go back into stupidity and ignorance and give up our freedoms. But what they did was, Marduk says, well, we're going to have to counteract this. So we're going to try and kill as many of these real Jews as possible so they can't get their seed mixed into the earth. And we're going to disseminate our own seed of wrath and violence and ignorance. So they brought some of these ancient czars in, and they took over the banking system, and they started lending money to people. They lended money to the czars and the people of Russia until they finally bankrupted them. And well, they caused wars with their financial abilities. And then when they cause a war, they get people to say, well, you got to, come get some money if you're going to win this war, and we'll finance it. So in Russia, they financed these people into this Russian Revolution, and basically took all of the money away and the wealth away from the original seed that ruled that part of the world. And by doing that, they usurped that line of the kings in Russia. They did the same thing over there in England. Now, there was originally this particular Ashkenazi Jew whose name was Battenberg. Battenberg, today they changed his name because they don't want you to see the word Berg on the end, because they know that was Jewish from the Ashkenazi line up in the German line. So they changed their name to the Mount Batten line. And they married into the Holy Royal Bloodline of Britain, and they had to change it to the Windsors. So it was a whole different line that stems back to this Ashkenazi Jews instead of the Sephardic Jews. And they were the ones that Princess Diana's mother was from this line. They're the ones that are married into the Rothschild line. They're the Ashkenazi Jews. They have control of all the banks. And with all their wealth and money, they started lending money to all these countries and bankrupting them and causing all these problems. So they've taken over the royal line of Britain, the royal line of Russia, Persia, all around the world. They've taken it over. And these go back all the way to the czars of Babylon. And so in America, they didn't have a holy bloodline. So what they did here was they came in with their money and their banking. They took over the banking system, and they started setting up all of this brainwashing and propaganda and took over our presidency. A lot of the presidents are of the same line that goes back to the Rothschilds. And they're in power over here to try and keep us down and keep us ignorant. And they don't give us a right to vote. And they don't give us democracy. And they're trying to slowly take away all of this ancient wisdom from us. Turn all the ancient symbols upside down and confuse us and make us think it's all from the evil Satan and stuff, when it's really the truth. And then, about in the 1800s, they started bringing up these organizations. They found out, Marduk found out by watching Christ that you could start organizations like the Masons, and they could be infiltrated into the world and teach people. So he said, I'm going to try that too. I'm going to make counter organizations. Now, a lot of people don't realize it. And if you've got any people who've ever been Jehovah's Witnesses or are interested in knowing this information, because they've just about kept this completely private and hid this from everybody. Almost nobody knows today who these Jehovah's Witnesses really are. But they were started by a man named Charles Taze Russell. He's one of the very wealthy bloodlines that goes back to the Rothschilds. Now, there is you can look up on the Google and read this for yourself, but Charles Taze Russell was a very close personal friend of the Rothschilds. And there are letters that he wrote before this. This is back in 1870 something, way before the Balfour Declaration in 1917. This was something that Charles Taze Russell had wrote about and predicted, which was the bringing about of the kingdom of Israel at that time, because he was the one that had a lot to do with bringing it about. He was writing letters to Rothschild at that time and explaining and helping the Rothschilds to know what they were going to do and how they were going to set the kingdom up. He was the one that was telling Rothschild how to organize this new kingdom of Israel. How to start the government and organize the people and indoctrinate the people and get everybody in the world to understand it was all right, and how to, what to tell the world was happening. And so Charles Taze Russell was one of the main architects of this entire thing with Israel. And very few people know this. So you see, the Rothschilds had all this money because they were independent, and they were being backed by Marduk in the astral realm, and they were this bloodline that was infiltrated into the Jewish religion. It goes back to the CEASARS that set up an ancient kingdom that goes in southern Russia and all the way down into the Ukraine and down into the Balkans. And this whole area was called Khazar. They were not real Jews. They were simply converted into Judaism, or supposedly converted, in order to counteract this revolution that the Essenes were doing down here with Charlemagne and the building of schools and the Magna Carta and all of the education and the democracy and things that were coming into the world to save the world. They were trying to do as a revolution to destroy the world. So they took over the British royal throne. They took over the Tsars of Russia. They took over the religions of America and took over the whole world. And to this day, they're deceiving us all. But I don't want you to be afraid. See, because our Father in heaven has already written the book of destiny. We all have a destiny, a purpose, and we will fulfill our purpose. Marduk is being allowed to do his thing. See, it's just a way to help us to grow. We have to learn by the things that we suffer. So now we're facing a big challenge, friends. We have someone who's gone in and is doing all this deception and trying to trick us and deceive us. Now we don't know what our Constitution is. We don't know what freedom is. We don't know what we're doing or who we are. But friends, this is why we've got to get this knowledge out. We've got to start telling people who they are. You're a child of our Father in heaven. You are an heir to the throne. You can tell that mountain to be uprooted and thrown into the sea, and it will obey you. You are not guilty. You are free. The Son of Man has set you free. You are free indeed. Go forward, friends. Go forward in triumph. Do not believe the deceiver. He's a slanderer. Get out there, friends. Tell everybody you know, and let your light shine, and get this information out, friends, because we're going to win this battle. The only thing stopping us is ignorance, friends. That's it. And we don't need to be ignorant. So, let's take this information in. Keep studying all the truth that we need to study so we can become, equipped for every good work. And let's tell everybody we know. And let's love our neighbor. And let's start, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, healing the sick. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and close there, friends, and I hope that this has helped some of you understand what's really going on, and I hope that you'll get this message out to everybody you know, friends. This here's David Vos, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. You guys have a good one.